Hey everyone, welcome to today's Vanderbloemen Network Live. I'm Anna Baker, the marketing manager at Vanderbloemen, and today I'm here to introduce Brett Connolly, our executive search manager, and he's going to be leading today's discussion on what seems to be the hottest topic right now, which is what are we going to do about the fall semester when it comes to student and family ministry? Right now here in Houston, schools are already pushing back their open dates, and it seems like social distancing is in our future for a while. So we want to hear from this panel about what they've been doing this summer, the tips and tricks that they can share with you, as well as what they're going to carry into the coming fall semester. So if you guys will leave your comments and questions in the comment section, we will address as many of those as possible at the end. And also, if you hear anything that resonates with you, a quote that you like, if you'll drop that in the comments as well, just so we can all engage and interact with each other, that would be great. And with that, I will kick it to you, Brett.
Yes, I am so thrilled to be here today and have this panel. I know that this has been definitely on my calendar for quite a while. I've been working with Holly and Anna to help fill this panel, and coming from student ministry, this is one of those things where I totally understand. I always said that the summer was the sprint and then the school year is like the marathon. And so we're coming from a unique summer season, and I know I've seen some people still doing stuff, still being able to have camp or a small gathering, just kind of depends on the region and what even the county is saying. But I've also seen a lot of people having to cancel stuff. And so going from this season of summer and really kind of being engaged to student ministry, what does that look like? And now entering into the fall, where generally speaking, this is the season where you're going to the schools. If you're a student pastor, a children's pastor, you're going to Friday night lights. You're even if you're seen by a student or a family for 5 seconds, that makes all the difference in the world to them sometimes. And so those opportunities might not be happening in this season. And with that, I also think of who may be watching this, whether that be a student pastor, a children's pastor, whether that be a volunteer who is kind of holding down the fort for this season. And this has been something that's been going on for 5 months at this point. I remember, mid-March, it was all right, I'll see everybody in 2 weeks. I had no idea that this was going to be going on for so long. And I also think if I thought that, there are probably a lot of student pastors that thought the same thing, or children's pastors that said, if I can just kind of get over this 2-week hump or this month-long period, then we'll go back to normal. And so a lot of student pastors, children's pastors have kind of become tech directors in this season too. I remember when James Bond got pushed back, I was like, oh no, this is the real sign that things are pausing for a while. But here we are. I am so excited for this group of panelists. A lot of them are in the trenches of ministry, whether they are student pastors or children's pastors in this moment, or they're leading as thought leaders in these spaces. And so what I want to start off is just kind of from my view, I see Levi in my top left corner. We're going to start with just introducing yourself, what your role is, where you're located within the world. And I want to ask everyone one question here, just starting off before we look into the fall semester. I want to ask, kind of looking back. I know we're still technically in the summer, but usually once you get over the end of July, you're looking at the fall already. But I want to ask one question, that is, what has been a surprise win that you have seen over these summer months, whether that be in student ministry or family ministry?
Yeah. So my name is Levi Yancey. I am at Grace Point Church in San Antonio, where it's summer, 11 months out of 12. So that's great. I have been at Grace Point for about a year now, working with 6th grade through 12th grade. One of the things I've seen that has been a win is home visits for sure. Home visits has been one of the biggest things that I was surprised that was just such a delight, honestly, not just for myself, but for the parents and the students. Basically, myself or one of the small group leaders will go to their house, take a lawn chair, sit outside in their front yard, talk to them for an hour. Sometimes bring them a smoothie from Chick-fil-A or Whataburger for our Texas fans. and just talk about life. It doesn't have to be anything super spiritual. It doesn't have to be anything, like super like focused, but just getting to see how they're doing. And it kind of just naturally leads to some really good conversations. So for me, definitely home visits has been one of the biggest wins I've seen throughout the summer.
Nice. Am I up?
You're up.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Elle Campbell. I am one of the co-founders of Stuff You Can Use. And we are a youth and kids ministry curriculum and resource company. We also do Grow curriculum. And so that's what I get to do all the time. And so it's been fun, especially the last few months, trying to figure out like, okay, we've been making this curriculum, doing all this stuff. How do we now help churches kind of pivot their thought process and their strategy and their approach? I would say, I think like the biggest win that I've seen is well, first of all, I love just watching people be creative. I think that is the most fun. And, constraints force us to be creative and to try new things and to solve some problems. So that has been really fun for me, just to kind of watch youth and kids pastors all over the place, trying new things and just, coming up with new solutions. But I mean, really, I think ultimately, like, it's forcing us to really practice the thing that we say we believe, which is that the church is not a building. And some of the new things that we are trying, like going online and doing all of this stuff, I think we're seeing is being able to reach people who were kind of on the fringes before, who maybe weren't attending regularly. So yeah, I think it's cool. I think it's bringing us back a little bit more to our mission rather than, the programs that we were used to doing.
All right, I think it's my turn now. So I'm Justin Wilkie. I'm at Grace Church in beautiful Reno, Nevada, where it is very sunny and hot right now. But we're dealing with it. Could be worse. I've been here for like 3 weeks, so this is very new place for me. So one of my wins just on the personal side is, and I'm the kids pastor here, by the way, if I didn't say that. So I oversee birth through 5th grade with our awesome kids team here. But making a move during COVID, that's my win. I successfully moved across the country. My marriage to my wife is still together. Like, things are solid. So I'm very thankful for that. That's just a personal win right there. We were in the Chicagoland area before this. So big transition for us. But yeah, a really cool win, actually. I was just thinking about this earlier. So, being new here, not too established, but it was really cool. A couple weeks ago was the first time our families were allowed to come back on campus for something. So we've had some adults on campus and stuff, but we had kids for the first time for a drive-through event. And it was incredible just to see the emotions that kids had. I think for our volunteer teams, it was really important to see the impact that they truly have on the lives of kids and families, right? As they're driving through and the window rolls down and some kids are crying, some kids are shouting out their favorite volunteer's name as they see them in the drive-through line. So that's been really cool just to see just that sort of impact and see how for our volunteers, even not just for me, but to see how important of a win that was for volunteers. So yeah, it's been pretty cool.
Very cool. I think perhaps I'm next.
You are.
Brett, thank you for having me on the panel and hosting this. I appreciate it. I'm Benjamin Windall and coming to you from Australia, where actually I started in youth ministry, student ministry years ago. But my formative years were really living in Portland, Oregon, working in student ministry at a local church there. Our ministry was called Generation Unleashed for a number of years. I've been back in Australia, church planning and senior pastoring for 11 years. And of late, I've really been writing and working in the space of generations. I think when I read the statistic, it was Barna, and I think it's gone up now, which was 59% of millennials raised in a church, which, I mean, I'm raised in a church myself, I'm a pastor's kid, have dropped out of church. It was enough to really stir me to ask the question, why? And the last couple of years, I've been doing a deep dive on where are we at in terms of church culture with millennials, with Gen Z, and how can we be a part of the solution? I think a win, I think there are a number of wins. And for me, just on a broader level, I can't help but just look at the gains we've made going digital. I know it probably seems obvious, But really, when you look at it, I think the church has been operating in analog mode for years with digital taped on top. Like, yes, we do some live streaming and yes, we do some social media, but our core model is still the VHS video blockbuster. And I think these 10 plus weeks have probably propelled us forward digitally 10 plus years in our adoption of technology and using digital platforms. And for what greater generation is that going to be significant than student ministry? It's a big win for us.
Yeah, and I think every ministry space like speaks about being agile, but like this season really forced everyone to actually be agile, you know? And so that's been really cool to see that aspect of things. And so as we kind of transition now from looking back to the summer months, but now we're looking towards the fall. Again, this is something with COVID that's just looming. There's just kind of are we opening up schools? There's so many variables here. And so I wanted to go ahead and just kind of ask Ben and Elle quickly here, just kind of like from your perspective, as you've like talked with different ministry spaces and things like that, from your perspective, have you seen a unique summer change fall calendars?
Mm-hmm.
You jump in, Elle.
Okay, here we go. I would say yes and no. Like there are certain things that do not have to change, but there are definitely things that need to adjust. And so, you know, we talk a lot about annual planning, like with kind of our crew of youth and kids pastors. So this is like at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And we're hearing people right now who are planning for the coming year. A lot of people are like, man, I don't know what to do. Like everything is so up in the air. But there are things that I think you can plan. So for example, I think like your teaching calendar, we are huge advocates for being strategic about what you teach and when you teach it. And so I think those like teaching topics, the passages of scripture that you're looking at, the series themes that you do, all of that can be planned out. And a lot of people have been sticking to their plan like over the summer, which is great. It's just the method that is going to change. So if you were planning to do a whole series in the book of James, do it. Just do it a little bit differently. So you don't have to completely uproot everything you've done. You just need to shift a little bit. And so really what we found is that probably about like 80% of your planning can actually stay the same, but you need to tweak like the 20% of your methodology in order to make it work. So when it comes to teaching, I think that's the case. When it comes to discipleship, I think that's the case. I mean, your events are probably going to be your biggest shift because you can't really do an event that's like not in person, but there's still like other options you can do. A lot of people are doing like Netflix parties and they're doing Zoom scavenger hunts and they're doing like drive-through events where they are kind of, you know, pulling up to kids' houses and doing things like that. So I think a lot of what you do can in fact stay the same, but it's really the methodology that needs to shift a little bit. And it's cool. It's fun watching people figure that out. I think people are in a lot of ways. So it's cool.
That's awesome.
That's great. I think I would jump on that and add that I think we can plan for uncertainty and embrace it. I remember when this first broke and it was like every day it was changing and we could barely keep up. And you almost felt bad as a leader having to get up and say, oh, remember what we said yesterday? Yeah, that's changed again. And I think we need to make sure we don't feel guilty as leaders for the rapidly changing environment we're trying to plan in, but we don't know what changes are going to come up in a month that we don't foresee it. We can't plan for it right now. I think embracing agility, embracing uncertainty in all of our planning helps us, and it can also put us at peace. I'm reminded of the Apostle Paul in the book of Acts. It's kind of interesting because it ends with this, it's almost a low because he's on this great missions trip and he thinks that something's going to happen. He has a plan all worked out, maybe kind of like our summer plans and our fall plans have been. And it ends with him under home arrest for an extended season of time in Rome. And yet his ministry flourishes. So it's like this massive change. And I think it's a really good reminder for us that even though the platform changes, our focus can still be people. Even if the context changes, God can still use our ministries to flourish. And so I think kind of embracing that, hey, it's very unique times, it's uncertain, and lean into that and contextualize it to the city, state, and micro area that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like in a way this season is a giant outdoor event. I remember, like, in student ministry, planning an outdoor event was always so stressful, especially in Houston, because one day there's an 80% chance of rain, and then there's a 0, and then it goes to 100. And so you almost have to plan 2 events at the same time to be flexible. And, like, we've been using kind of the buzzword of agile. And that seems like what's at the forefront moving forward. You almost have to plan 2 or 3 things. And that brings me to, like, sustainability. There might be some student pastors that were like, okay, we need to do this, and they've made it through this sprint of a summer and they're exhausted. And so I think this is a great season to not, like, downgrade, but maybe pivot attention to make sure that your ministry space is sustainable, and you can do this for, like, the long haul, whatever this COVID season looks like. And so I want to ask Levi, and I want to ask Justin here, how has your personal, like, student ministry and children's ministry calendar shifted this fall as compared to maybe fall calendars in the past?
Yeah. So I want to touch real quick on what you said about, like, sustainability, because I noticed that super quickly, as you know, basically when spring break hit, and then COVID has just, continued since then, the longest spring break ever. And I noticed super quickly that, like, for me personally, as a student pastor, and for my leaders, like, since there was just such an unknown factor, just, like, looming each week, that you would have, like, these expectations that couldn't be fulfilled. You didn't know what the expectation was, whether it's via Zoom or Instagram or, YouTube Live or whatever it is. And so I know for us this summer, we kind of just chilled out, basically. Just took the summer to just consistently have freedom almost. We called it Freedom Summer. And so the hope was that for us in San Antonio, the cases started going down probably in, like, early June, and they spiked back up probably about late June, something like that. And so the hope for us was that throughout the summer, we would be able to meet, like, via small groups, each small group meeting in person, but doing something outside. So whether that was tennis, hiking, swimming, like volleyball, whatever it is, something safe. And it's just each small group having the freedom to do whatever they wanted to. And then we had our small group leaders actually record themselves, like a message. And I kind of asked the students, right before the summer started, basically, like, hey, what do you feel like you really want to know in this season, right? Like, whether, and a lot of it ended up being, like, identity and like self-image, self-worth, self-value, those big things that consistently need to be taught on and reaffirmed. And so our leaders would end up putting a video out each Wednesday throughout the whole summer. So it was just like a 2-in-1 deal where our leaders are still being empowered. They're still being able to, use their gifts and talents. And also, even if that's not their gift or talent, being able to be stretched and to have that opportunity to where they might not be super comfortable doing that, on a Wednesday night or a Sunday, teaching and preaching, but now they're able to, use the camera, hook it up, and then just send it to me. And so the sustainability part, I think definitely this summer has been huge, whether we end up going, in person most of the semester, or we wait until January. But for us, we are kind of planning, like, 2 ways, similar to what you said, Brett. We're planning as if everything is going to be just fine. And we're planning if the disaster continues to be a disaster. So, which I feel like in student ministry in general, you have to have a disaster plan always. That's great, right? I feel like plan A is the disaster plan. And so our hope is that we might do less events in general, just because of, meeting in person and things like that. But what would it look like for us to move a lot of our events outside, especially as the temperature starts to go down a little bit, like in, like, October maybe, or like November, not now. But also, if we were to just move a lot of our events into our, like, main worship building to have a little more spacing and the proper safety precautions, things like that. And so that's kind of the gist of what we're focusing on, is just figuring out like, hey, what is going to be best for this group of students in this season right now, and their parents, obviously. And so our hope is, if we do end up going back in person, that's going to look like either every other week on Wednesdays, or once a month, and just having like a very big meeting, maybe outside, once a week or once a month or every other week. And then from there, probably doing recordings and doing Zoom breakout small groups. So that's kind of what we're thinking for this semester right now.
Yeah, for us, it's a little weird being brand new and trying to figure out what are we going to do this fall. And so, I think some of the big things for us are really like something that I think is important is, and this speaks to sustainability, is we think about sustainability for volunteers and staff, but what I've begun to realize is parents are beat. Parents are worn out, and where we are in the Reno area, any day now we're going to find out if we're going back to school or if it's going to be online school for the rest of for this whole fall semester. And so there are a lot of parents who are very anxious about that, who are already worn out from a long summer, and who were worn out by the time summer started because they had several months of having their kids at home when they didn't expect that. And so one of the things that we're looking at, and what's funny is if my team's watching this, they don't know this yet, so spoiler alert for our meeting later, but sorry guys, but if some things we're thinking about are parent respite events. Is there a way that we can give parents some space to be cared for, whether it's we care for them or whether it's we find a way to care for their kids, and get their kids here on site in some way, so that way they can have a date night, so that way they can do something. We've done that in the past. Like I think for a lot of ministries, that's family ministries, that's kind of a normal thing, but I think it's so much more important right now than it has been in the past. And so that's a change, I think, for us, of really thinking more of how do we care for parents really well, because, and part of that too on the kids side is that parents have become small group leaders, right? So there's also this part of like, they're not only taking on extra responsibility at home, but there's also the spiritual leadership that, we've always believed that parents were supposed to be spiritual leaders. We've always believed in empowering and equipping them, but now it's like real, like there is no letting the church do it. It's on you right now. And so that's been a shift for us as well, is really shifting towards this empowerment and equipping idea of really leaning into parents, almost in the way that we would do with our small group leaders. Right? Like, giving them training, sending them conversation guides, and here's how to talk to your kid about this stuff. And here's how to lead a family small group at home, and really focusing on that. And so that's very new and kind of a focus for us. And then I think for like our kids, we still do, so we stopped doing, like, we don't do any virtual small groups or anything like that. Instead, we have kind of spread out our week. So our kids show up on Sunday for a drive-through event every Sunday where they get activities. It's kind of a fun time. We get volunteers here. And then throughout the week, we release stuff for them to do. So Wednesdays, there's teaching videos that go out that's split up into 3 different age groups. So that way there's a fun video that we're starting this week, to where on Fridays, there's a fun activity that we kind of lead that kids can do together. And so we're kind of trying to spread out throughout the week, like, hey, here's things for you to do to, as a kid, but also ways for parents to talk to their kids about their faith throughout the entire week, rather than concentrating on like, just one day. And so that'll probably continue through the fall for us, because it really doesn't look like it's gonna, let up around here. And so that's our plan right now. We also have a kids camp that we normally do in the summer that has been pushed to the fall. And so now, multiple plans, right? Now we're going to plan for an in-person kids camp, and for a virtual kids camp, and for a at-home kid, right? Like a more neighborhood possible kids camp. So yeah, it's a lot to try and have multiple contingency plans all the time for every single thing we do. it's taxing. So I think for ministry leaders, I think it's important to remember to take care of yourself during this time. I'm really bad at that. I'm horrible at taking breaks. I'm horrible at taking time off. And luckily I work in an environment where that's very much encouraged, where there are people looking out for my spiritual health and for my physical health even, right? My exhaustion level and all that. So that way I don't burn out. So I think that's so important for us to think about. It's okay to be a little selfish sometimes with that, right? Because you're no good if you're burnt out. You can't help anybody else. You can't lead well from a place of burnout. So,
no, for sure, and those are great add-ons. Those are great thoughts. And I wanted to ask Ben and Elle here. We've talked a lot about how summer is different than the fall, and sometimes the summer feels like students are coming to you, and then in the fall and the spring, it feels like you're going out to the students usually. And you're going to school lunches, plays, choir concerts, theater, all of it, all the football games, all those things. And in this season, how are y'all seeing it? How are you meeting students where they're at in this season? How are you seeing that? I know, Ben, you've mentioned about an emphasis on the generation. How does that translate into this time of COVID?
Well, I appreciate what Justin said, and I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, where he said they're not just doing conventional small groups, but they're really putting things out throughout the week. I think why that is such a great approach is we have to be honest with the online viewing habits, even if we're not comfortable with them, which is people's viewing habits have become very diluted. And not just from how many different platforms there are on social media. I'm talking just church and ministry. We've noticed this, and I think it's on a curve. So people aren't just purely looking at your church or your student ministry. They're looking at 10 other. There's an avalanche. People are getting flooded right now. So why I say that is this: I think that having as many of those touch points as what you can throughout the week, instead of bundling everything into here's the one moment where we are giving you our ministry digitally, like a Sunday service live stream, right? It's the same as we think that people all are going to be sitting at home watching our live stream, and they're not. But if we take that and then package that up differently throughout the week, so they have more opportunities that we're putting in front of them, be it a podcast, be it a blog post, here's a 5-minute version of that. I think that particularly right now helps, because Zoom fatigue is very real. And it's hard to get somebody to sit down for 45 minutes or an hour and here's the message, here's the ministry for the week. And I feel the same way personally. So I get it. So I like that idea. How can we, instead of putting everything in one bag, how can we package that and divide that up where you're almost looking at your calendar from a 7-day-a-week perspective? I think is very helpful. And for us as leaders, if we're not fresh, our ministries will never be fresh. And it can feel exhausting, right? Because we're trying so many different things, and we're trying it in a context that we have no control over. And I think I'd put 2 things out in relation to that, and they've helped me. The first is just recognizing what we don't have control over, right? There's nothing worse than our beautiful fall plans getting disrupted. And we could have had not just months leading into this, sometimes years have been building for a certain moment. And in that year and that fall, we're going to hit this level. Our leaders are ready, our momentum, and then that gets taken away. And it can feel like not just a few weeks setback or months setback. It can feel like years. And I don't think if we do ourselves any favors if we become obsessed with numbers during this time, we become obsessed with online viewing, and we put too much pressure on ourselves to control what we can't control. We hear the phrase, be kind to yourself. Yeah. If there were ever a time for us as leaders to be kind to ourselves, it's now. So come to terms with what we can't control. And I'm not sure the best way to word this. I'll just say it the way it sits with me. And that is not to put too much pressure on people. I think that counterintuitively, it may feel like fall is here. Are you ready? Push, right? And I'm that kind of leader. It's like, let's drive it. Let's lead it. That's our role. But there are moments where the shepherd needs to go from being a long way ahead of the sheep in leadership mode and come back into the flock in pastoral mode. And we're in a season where the pastoral matters, where the shepherd can actually walk at the pace of their sheep without beating the sheep, going, guys, we've got it. Fall is here. Programs, faster, effectiveness, growth. I think if there's a moment in history and in our ministry journeys to say, at this point, I'm a shepherd, and I'm okay at going at the pace of my people, the pace of my students, the pace of where the sheep are at. I think that will give us a win in the long run, not just a short term, push, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I very much agree with that. I feel like there's this balance, right, that a lot of people have been and are always trying to figure out, this balance between content that we have to create and like actual connection with people. And one of the things that I saw happening early in this pandemic is that people really leaned toward the side of content creation. They thought like, oh man, I need to do more videos. I need to be posting on social media more. I need to be doing all of this stuff. And it ended up just being such an overload for everybody, for teenagers, for parents, for youth pastors. It was so much. And so I love what you guys are sharing, like just the way that you've kind of shifted your approach throughout this process. Like you figured out what's not working. Like, okay, we're not going to try to do the small group thing for a minute. Like we're going to have parents be small group leaders. That is so important, to like listen to your people. And I think that is such an important part of meeting students and families where they're at, of not even just physically, but just what do you want? Like, what do you need? What is most helpful to you, rather than what's furthering my agenda and plan and vision as a pastor. So I think we need to be really good listeners. We really need to focus on connection. But obviously we do need to put out some kind of content in order to, teach and spark discussion and stuff. And so totally agree with what you guys are saying, this idea of like dripping content out throughout the week. A couple things that I've seen people do that has been really interesting is they would take their typical like sermon plan that they might, deliver from a platform, but break it up into 1-minute segments, or maybe longer, just depending what platform you're using. But like if you're using Instagram, you've got a 1-minute time limit to deal with. So they would just break it up into little chunks and then post that throughout the week. And then if they actually did some kind of Zoom call, a lot of people are not, because they're just not working, but for some people they are still working, depending on the group. They might play the whole video together and then discuss it. Some other things are people knowing that they can't really get students together for an actual conversation, is leveraging the comment section on social media for some discussion. So how can we be posting conversation starters that will actually drive discussion? You got to be careful. You can't post like too vulnerable of a question, because that's going to get weird and you're just going to hear crickets in the comments. But yeah, just finding like that balance of what is actually going to generate connection instead of just throwing more content at people. So yeah, I love the ideas that you guys are sharing. And yeah, I think if we focus on the actual connection part, it'll be good for all of our souls, that we don't have to be like cranking new stuff out every single day. And maybe for some people listening, it sounds overwhelming at first to think, oh, we need to post something every single day. But if you are strategic about the way that you do that, that can actually be a really, really simple solution. If you just have like, Justin, the schedule that you broke down, if you just create a schedule for yourself, like here's what I'm doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, weekends, you could sit down on a Monday and just plan out all of the content for the week. You can schedule it, you can write it all in one batch, and just get it done. It doesn't mean you have to be like glued to your phone for the rest of your life until this pandemic ends. There are ways to do it. So yeah, just want to affirm all of the things you guys are saying. So good. And it's just exciting to see people leaning more toward the actual pastoral side rather than the, oh, I'm, content creator, professional speaker, game show host. Like, we're pastors. Come on. So it's good.
That's great. And My next question here is back to Levi and Justin, and we've talked a lot about volunteers and kind of that space of ministry. And I mentioned this in the summer focused Facebook event, but I think it's worth mentioning again. But one of my mentors early on told me that your ministry space is only as good as your volunteers. And so now I'm looking at, here we are, month 5 of COVID stuff. And so I wanted to ask specifically y'all, as y'all are in the ministry spaces here in student ministry and children's ministry, how are you connecting with like new volunteers? How are you leading them? How are you finding them? How are you training in this season? But at the same time, how are you focusing on the volunteers that you currently have? How are you loving on them? How are you encouraging them in this season?
Yeah. Justin, did you want to go first?
Sure. So what's great for me is that being brand new, I have a really easy excuse to just start reaching out to random people. It's awesome. So not that I couldn't do that any other time, but I just have a little extra level of, I have a little extra excuse there. So that's a big tool that I'm using right now is, my team, we created a list of families and current volunteers, committed families, who I just get to reach out to now and get to see if we can grab dinner, jump on a Zoom call, whatever's going to work for them. Everybody's in different places with what they're comfortable with. And so, so that's kind of a way that I'm kind of going, okay, as we're getting to know you, going, hey, would you ever be interested in serving in kids ministry? Or do you have any passion for student ministry? Or just trying to feel some of that out as I build connections, which when I think about that, I realize I could have done that in any other season too, right? It didn't just have to be this season. Like, as you mentioned, leaning into that pastoral side, right? Like relationships are all like, I could always be building these relationships. And sometimes it just kind of falls to the side because I'm focused on content development or leading our staff team and things like that, or a current volunteer team, right? And then as far as caring for current volunteers, we did something really cool. And I say that because I got emotional, and I don't easily get emotional about these things. But so because we're having a weekly event on site here at our campus, and we're having volunteers help us. We actually created a space for volunteers to watch service together with us as a team. So staff and volunteers watching service, socially distanced. We're providing food this weekend. We're having breakfast burritos if any of you want to show up for that. But like, it's kind of just, it was great because I'm sitting in this room and all these people who haven't seen each other in, months, and they're singing worship songs together and, just being together. And that was really cool because it gave our team a chance to encourage our volunteers, but it also, what we've learned our volunteers really want is they just want connection right now. They are craving connection to each other. And they're craving that to the families, but they're really craving connection to each other, right? Creating an awesome volunteer environment is all about creating an awesome environment where people love to serve. And part of that is the relationships they get to build with each other. And so, so we're trying to figure out how to do that in this time, socially distanced. How do we continue to foster relationships between our volunteers, and realizing that's one of the best ways to care for them right now in our context.
Yeah, that's really good. And for us, specifically for our volunteers right now, and how we're looking at taking care of them and just being intentional is, and training as well, is our curriculum is Download Youth Ministries. And so they have DYM University, which is like so solid. And we just are starting that, I think in August, basically. So there's 4 courses, I believe, and then we're just going to go like once a month, each course once a month. And then at the end of the month, we're going to take time just to, talk about what stuck out to you the most. What are some of the things that you really intrigued you, or you didn't know about, or something you want to add on to. And it's just amazing whenever you give your leaders opportunities to learn how much you see they want to learn, right? Like they want to be educated, because obviously for a lot of people with education comes confidence, right? And with that confidence, they'll start doing things that they've been naturally wired to by God, that they just didn't have like the proper knowledge or education to do and go forth with. And so we're excited to start that. With that like once a month type, we'll probably do it on Zoom. And something we did right before the summer started was we were doing Zoom on Wednesdays for our students. And then we break into small groups. And so after the Zoom was over at like 8:30, every other week, we would just kind of catch up with the leaders, like, hey, what can we be praying for you? Like, what's going on in your life? What is something that, tell us something great that's happening. How can we be praying for you? Different things like that. And it was amazing. Similar to like what Justin said and Elle is, okay, basically everybody has said connection, right? Brett, Anna, everybody has said it. It's connection. It is true. Like God is relational, and there's no doubt about that. And we see that played out in how we have this deep desire to interact with one another, and like how so many people are hurting right now. And so that's kind of our focus as we focus on training leaders right now and connecting with them. More so for new leaders, we are kind of like it's like a network marketing almost, like not like in a negative sense, but in the way of like, hey, can you send me 3 friends that you think would be interested in student ministry, right? Like I've only been here a year. And I know, Justin, like you said, you've been here like a month, or if you've been at your church for a month, right? So if for those student pastors, children pastors, family pastors that haven't been there for a while, like it is a season where you have to use your resources around you. Use people that have been there for 20 years, use people that have been there for 10, use people that used to be in student ministry or children's ministry, and just ask them like, hey, who do you think would be good for a small group leader? Who do you think would be good for a greeter? Who do you think would be good for like serving in food? Who's, whatever it is, asking other people in that way has seemed to be really, really helpful. And I also would add as well that during this season, like, I feel like it's a really good, like, kind of like both good and bad, but I feel like it's a really good season to ask people that you probably would normally say no. And I say that because like, they're not going to be fully thrust into, you're sitting in this classroom with these 15 girls and they're all staring at you and you're wondering if they're making fun of you, like whatever. And now you're nervous. But you can like acclimate yourself a little bit better, whether it's through Zoom, whether it's through GroupMe, whether y'all are going to meet outside and get like snow cones or something like that. And so I have been challenged to like ask people that I normally wouldn't ask. And so that's kind of the gist for us.
That's awesome. And my last question, and I want to really open it up to all 4 of y'all, kind of starting off with Ben and then Elle, and then Anna will hop on after this question. But I just wanted to ask all of y'all, in a way, what are some helpful tools, or what are some like words of wisdom that you may give a student pastor or a children's pastor in this season that maybe been doing this for several months with COVID and kind of need a space for a fresh season? What's some tools that you would recommend? What are some words of wisdom or encouragement?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there are a lot of technology tools that we're probably all familiar with and using. So I'll try and speak to the leader as a person, because referencing my earlier comments, if the leader's not fresh, if the leader is empty, if the leader is struggling, and here we are, we're ramping up for fall. I think just recognizing that we are in a very unique moment in our lives and in history so that we get context for the moment. So for example, like I remember September 11, but we're ministering to an age group that maybe wasn't even alive, which is a weird thought for me. I suddenly feel old during September 11. September 11 was really the last culturally defining moment. And that was 2 generations ago, meaning everything that was normal in a moment, in a day, just came to a screeching halt, right? And the world huddled around TVs and just watched this horrific moment take place. But for the vast majority of the world, you were still watching. I mean, I was watching from Australia. You were watching somewhere else, some other place, some other people that were affected. And we were mainly indirectly affected. The difference with this is our normal has come to a halt, but it's global and it's affecting all of us simultaneously. So it's unprecedented in our lifetimes. But I think, and this has really helped me understanding, it may be unprecedented to me, but it's not unprecedented to humanity, or even over the last 100 years. When you look at natural disasters and famines and global disruption. I mean, you go back to the 1918, I don't want to digress too much, Brett, but the 1918 Great Influenza, I think it's relevant. They're now saying over 100 million people died, and largely in a 13-week period, more than World War I and World War II combined. Why does history matter for the leader right now leading students? Because it helps us locate ourselves in history and understand, okay, I can breathe. We're going through something quite unique, and it's teaching us a lot of things, but I want to highlight one. As the modern church, we've been very effective at being the church gathered. And we're good at events, and we're good at conferences, and we're good at services. This is forcing us to become good at the church scattered. And if we're transparent with ourselves, just from a broad perspective, we were caught off guard, right? It was revealing, like, oh no, what do we do without meetings? Can we even survive without meetings? Well, that should kind of be a little bit scary to us if we don't even know if our ministries and churches can survive without meetings. I'm not saying meetings don't matter, but we're good at that side of things. We need to continue to be good at that side of things when we can. But this idea that the church in the book of Acts was the church gathered, but also the church scattered. And now we're being forced, Justin mentioned earlier, we're putting an emphasis back on parents to have to lead some of their own teaching in their homes. Well, what an awesome thing. Because for how long have parents maybe felt, all right, the kids are dropped off at youth ministry. See you later. It's date night and they'll be taken care of. Well, when we look at the numbers, and 88% of high schoolers within 2 years of graduating from high school are going to have a crisis of their faith, we've got to ask the question, what can we do differently at home? So that's where some of this crises will force us into things that may not seem like a program answer or a cookie cutter. Here's what to do. It's forcing us to get better in homes. It's forcing us to get better as parents. And it's teaching us how to be the church scattered, not just a church gathered.
That's so good. I love it. Everything Ben said, I agree. I also would encourage, well, first of all, yes, to just reiterate, I mean, and kind of underscore all of that. I think we needed this shakeup to dislodge us from our dependency on programs and things the way that they've always been. I think a lot of the times we come up with our ministry strategy and ministry approach just based on what we've seen done before. And the wonderful thing about this season is that nobody has any idea what they are doing. And it's really lovely because all of the understanding of who's the expert has kind of been upended. And it is really allowing some people to kind of rise up in their own creativity and their own communities to be innovators. And I find that very exciting because there's so many amazing ideas that are, there haven't been books published about them because people are just figuring it out in the trenches. And I think that's pretty exciting. So I love that. And I guess I would just say, in light of that, the fact that nobody knows what they're doing, that I think as leaders, we have to lead really from a place of empathy with our people. We have to figure out what the needs are. We have to figure out what people are struggling with. We have to really lean into all of the different groups of people who we're leading. What do our students need? Keeping in mind that one student probably needs something very different from another type of student. And I think just the shakeup in general, it gives us this opportunity to be curious, more curious than we have in the past about the people that we're leading. It will maybe give us an opportunity to see that we are not leading a monolith of people. We have people who are experiencing the pandemic in very, very different ways. And I think it's an invitation to be really empathetic to the different types of people we're ministering to be creative about solving and meeting actual needs and actual problems instead of just the problems and needs that we are projecting and assume that are there. I think it gives us the chance to practice empathy with our local schools, to be like, hey, what do you need right now? I think it allows us to just try new things, but I think it all starts from a place of empathy and curiosity. So I would say whatever you're doing right now, start there. Don't just try to do what everybody else is doing, because nobody knows what they're doing. Start with your people and solve their actual problems. And I think that'll be a good path forward.
Yeah. How do you follow up from that? Appreciate you setting me up for success there. Yeah, that's really good. That's true, right? Like finding the need. What is the need? And then just starting from there. Something that I would add as well is, which hopefully like a lot of people are already doing this, but like how to keep your ministry area like fresh and new with ideas is, and follow, right? Follow people, right? Follow the BYM people, follow Elle and Kenny, follow Youth Pastors Only, like all the Facebook pages, like anybody that you see that like is being shared on Instagram story, follow them, right? It's not super creepy, all right? You're just becoming a fan of them, all right? You know, you're admiring their work. So you keep that headspace, you're good. But follow different people, and like Elle said, it is such a blank canvas that is like scary at the same time as encouraging and exciting, right? And so with that kind of like that nervousness, anxiety type that can come with it is, man, show yourself grace, right? Like show yourself grace. Like Jesus said, we deserve grace, and it's something that we've done, right? It's simply just because of Jesus and the work that he's done on the cross. And so if you try something, whether it's Zoom or Instagram or in person, it doesn't work, show yourself grace, right? If you tried your best, if you prayed it up, it didn't go the way you were hoping, there's grace in that. And that's just the amazing thing about ministry, and just being a follower of Jesus, is that like he knows our heart. He knows that we want to pursue seeing people come to him, and it might not look the way we think it's going to, and there's grace in that. And so that's something I had to learn like over this summer, is just show myself grace, because like Elle said, nobody knows what's going on. There's no written formula for this. And so and then yeah, and also like with your local youth pastors and children pastors, like if you're not already in a group with them, I learned this from Elle and Kenny's podcast, is like start a group meet or a group message or whatever. Don't start a group message. Don't do that. Definitely start a group meet. But if you're not already like meeting with different people and learning what they're doing, then you're missing out on a lot of potential new ideas and perspectives. And it's just been super helpful for me. So.
Yeah, now I get to follow up all three of you. So I'm still wrapping my head around Ben's comments earlier. So I don't know how much more wisdom or tools I have to add to that. I think the only thing for me that I would add, this has been a theme for what I've said so far during our time, has been care for yourself during this time. Seriously, you know, and there really is no good, I mean, there's a couple tools out there and stuff, but there's not really great tools for that other than just to take some time this week if you need it and evaluate the season of life, right? I've done a really bad job. I'm saying this, I'm speaking for myself right now, saying I need to hear this, which is I've done a really bad job over the last 4 or 5 months of actually seeing the opportunity in this season for myself, for my own ministry, not to further, programs, not to further kids ministry, but to actually go deeper in my own relationship with God, to actually refresh my soul during this time, to take the time that I need to make sure that whenever this is over with, whenever we move, things go back to normal, and I'm going to put that in quotes because I don't know if things will ever be truly normal again, that I'm ready, that I am fully refreshed, that I am filled, so that way I can, help fill others. And so whether that's finding a great devotion, making sure that you're spending some time with God every day, or for me, it's been, a great resource for me has been, there's a website put out by a church in Portland called practicingtheway.org. It's one of my favorite resources during this season that has completely challenged how I view my relationship with God and making sure I'm spending daily time with him in different ways. And so yeah, that's my encouragement and wisdom, is just really see this as an opportunity. If you haven't already, begin to look at it that way. You know, you have an opportunity to slow down, to rest, to you know, evaluate, you know, this season, and think about what your life is going to look like moving forward, what your ministry is going to look like moving forward personally, not just programmatically, but personal ministry, what that's going to look like for you. So.
Well, that's awesome. And Anna's about to hop on, but before she does that, I just want to thank all of y'all for joining. Ben, I know it's like in the middle of the night in Australia. Just thank you all. It's been awesome.
Yeah, so we got some great engagement and some great questions, which we do not have time really to dive into. But before I ask our last question, I do want to encourage you panelists to go back to this post and look at the questions that people have been asking and share your wisdom with them. Because I know there's a lot of people looking for help and guidance and just ideas right now. So yeah, to mimic what Brett said, thank you so much for being here. And to close out, I know we only have 5 minutes, so if you can keep it kind of short, but want to get really vulnerable with our last one and talk about mistakes made during this time. I think it's really helpful for people to hear what other people have done that haven't worked out. So if you can kind of just share one thing that you have tried as you've been trying to push new boundaries and be creative that hasn't worked out, so we can spare some other people from going down that path. And if anyone's ready, go ahead and raise your hand. If not, then Ben, I will put you on the spot. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't know if I guess this is a mistake. So I've realized that it's going to be slower getting people re-engaged into a routine again. And so I found myself making the mistake of getting my hopes up that when we plan something that everybody's going to show up just like they used to. And then finding myself feeling disappointed about that or let down. And so just not making that mistake, realizing it's going to take time. It's, you know, we're getting people back into routines. We're trying new things, and you know, that's okay. It's okay if you don't hit if you set a goal and you don't hit that goal, as far as like, oh, I'm going to have 50 people show up or 100 people show up. That's okay. Give yourself grace there and go, okay, you know what? It might take 3 or 4 times before we finally get to that point.
That's so true. I think one of my early mistakes, and oh my goodness, have I had a lot of live streaming mistakes and technical mistakes during this. It's been out of control. But one of my early mistakes, I think, was in my tone and in my posture, maybe just swinging so quickly to, you know, faith, everything's going to be okay. And I've had to step back from that and recognize we're really dealing with 3 pandemics. We have the obvious, which is the viral pandemic. We have an economic global pandemic that's affecting economies all around the world. And we have what I would call a grief pandemic. And I think early on, I saw it as this is an event and maybe it's a problem to solve. And now I'm looking at it that this is a grief process to enter. Grief in the sense that almost the way we would grieve the loss of a loved one, we're grieving the loss of our normal lives. And I think entering into that as a process, which kind of echoes what Justin says, the pace going slower, but entering into the process of what people are navigating emotionally, approaching that through empathy, has helped me from the earlier instinctive leadership mindset of solve the problem, put confidence in front of people. I said, hey, you know what? This isn't a problem to solve or an event to manage. It's a process to enter.
That's good. I'm in a bit of a unique scenario from the 3 of you because I'm not serving in a local church as a staff member. So a little different, but I mean, I think for me, I guess a mistake is just thinking like, I'll be fine. I'm totally mentally prepared for this. And then realizing, oh, I'm losing my mind. I'm going insane. So I think maybe just being a little overconfident about all of our own mental health here was maybe part of it. But I guess on a more practical sense, right when the pandemic hit, we were working on like publishing our new year of curriculum. And so we had to go back through it and we're like, okay, we have to get rid of all these toilet paper games. We have to get rid of all of these games that have, you know, children like face to face, like doing something very close up. So there was a whole bunch of, oh, wow, this is not going to work so much in the year 2020. So that was fun. We got rid of a lot of toilet paper games. That's sad.
That's toilet paper. Rest in peace. Missed that. I would add real quick, similar to what Justin said, is that whenever I started doing Zooms on Wednesdays, I mean, you have an expectation, right? You have an expectation of like, oh man, I'm gonna see these students. I know these will show up, and then the students that don't normally show up at all, like this is a great chance for them to come. And sometimes that's gonna work. Sometimes it's not. Like Elle said earlier, that for some people it's gonna work, and some people it's not. And so taking in stride and knowing that like your expectations can change, and that's okay. And finding the win in that is like the beauty of it, right? Like we're hoping to have this many students on a Zoom call. Well, you only have this certain amount, and oh look, it's your core students. Like now you have a visual, like very clear cut picture of these are my core students that are here each week. They can easily get overlooked and easily not be appreciated because you're worried about all the fringe students or the new students, which is all great, but just kind of managing those expectations and taking that in stride with grace.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you guys so much again for joining us and for all of your insight. We will post this on our blog tomorrow for anyone who wants to rewatch it, and we'll have some bullet points of some of the main things that we talked about. So yeah, thank you guys for joining us, and stay tuned for more from these panelists.